Okay, so I'll start out reading the Sanskrit and synonyms and translation, and you can read the first, you can read the purport. And, we'll
Okay.
read a paragraph at a time of the purports. This one only has one paragraph, so you can read the whole paragraph. The next one has several paragraphs, so we'll just take turns. Okay?
Okay. Okay. Can you
Cool.
hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. All right, so text 5. Nirmanamo hajita sangado shadhyatma nitya vinivrita kama dvandvar vimukta sukaduka samgyar gajati amuda paramaviyam tat. Ni, without. Mana, false prestige. Moha and illusion. Jita, having conquered sangha of association. Dosha, the false. Adhyatma, in spiritual knowledge. Nitya, in eternity. Vinivrita, associated. Kama, from lust. Dvandvai, from the dualities. Vimukta, liberated. Sukha dukkha, happiness and distress. Samgyai, named. Gajanti, attained. Amuda, unbewildered. Padam, situation. Aviyam, eternal, taught, that. Translation. Those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false. Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Those who are free from false prestige, illusion, false association. We got an echo. Who understands? Do you have, is there any way you can use headphones?
I can try. Let me see. I don't have any on me right now. I can't find them. It seems not to be around.
Okay. Well, there's going to be a echo then in the background. Wait a minute, now I don't hear it. Those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, who are free from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who, unbewildered, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. Okay, go ahead.
Surrender. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep.
The surrendering process is described here very nicely. The first qualification, that one should not be deluded by pride, because the conditioned soul is puffed up, thinking himself the lord of material nature. It is very difficult for him to surrender unto the supreme personality of Godhead. One should know by the cultivation of real knowledge that he is not lord of material nature. Oh, I'm sorry. I kind of skipped a line. Pride is due to illusion, for although one comes here, stays for a brief time, and then goes away, he has the foolish notion that he is the Lord of the world. He thus makes all things complicated, and he is always in trouble. The whole world moves around the impression people are considering the land, this earth, to belong to human society, and they have divided the land under the false impression that they are the
Proprietors.
Oh yeah, proprietors. One has to get out of this false notion that human society is the prop what is it again?
Proprietor.
Yeah, proprietor of this world, when one is freed from such a false notion, he becomes free from all the false associations caused by familial, social, and national affections. These faulty associations bind one of this material world. After this stage, one has developed spiritual knowledge. One has to cultivate knowledge of what is actually his own and what is actually not his own. And when one has an understanding of things as they are, they becomes free from all dual conceptions such as happiness and distress, pleasure and pain. He becomes full in knowledge. Then it is possible for him to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Yeah, that was good. This reminds me of Prabhupada's peace formula. That was discussed in chapter 5. The last chapter of the last verse of the 5th chapter is actually the peace formula. And Krishna and Prabhupada wrote a pamphlet during the Vietnam War and passed it out in front of the United Nations building with his disciples. And he was saying that the problem with human society is that they think they're the proprietors, but actually Krishna is the proprietor of everything. And not even this body belongs to us. Everything belongs to Krishna. And when one understands that, number one, Krishna is the proprietor of everything, and number two, that he is the supreme enjoyer of everything, we're not the enjoyers. We're cooperating with Krishna. We're the enjoyed. Krishna enjoys us. And we're not the enjoyers. And also, we're not the best friend of every living entity. Krishna is the best friend of every living entity. When we understand these three things, then we can have peace in this world, because then we're not fighting over different, this is my land, this is my family, this is my nation, this is my oil, whatever it is, of the trying to usurp the resources of material nature and fight over them. So that's the peace formula. And okay, so let's go on to text 6 here. Natad Bashayate Suryo Nasasanko Napavaka Nagatva Nivartante Tadamam Paramamama. Not tat that Basayate illuminates Surya the sun, nor Sasanka the moon, nor Pavaka fire, electricity, yet where Gatva going, never. Nivartante, they come back, Taddama, that abode, Paramam, supreme, Mama, my. Translation, that supreme abode of mine is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. You can read the first paragraph.
The spiritual world, the abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, which is known as Krishna Loka, Goloka Vrindavana, is described here. In the spiritual sky, there is no need of sunshine, moonshine, fire, or electricity, because all the planets are self-luminous. We have only one planet in the universe, the sun, which is self-luminous, but all the planets in the spiritual sky are self-luminous. The shining effulgence effulgence is a man emanating from the planet Krishna, Goloka Vrindavana. Part of the sun shining effulgence is covered by the Mahatattva, the material world. Other than this, the major portion of that shining sky is full of spiritual planets, which are called, what are those called? Yeah. Chief of which is Goloka Vrindavana. As long as the living entity is in the dark material world, he is the conditioned life. But as soon as he reaches the spiritual sky by cutting through the false, perverted tree of this material world, he becomes liberated. Then there is no chance of him coming back here in this conditional life. The living entity considers himself to be the lord of this material world, but in his liberated state, he enters into the spiritual kingdom and becomes an associate of the Supreme Lord. There he is enjoyed eternal bliss, life, and full of knowledge.
Oh, okay.
I thought the sun is a star.
It is a star. Well, actually, according to the Vedas, the sun is a self-luminous planet, and the moon are reflections of the sun, or reflections of the sun, like the planets like Mars and Jupiter. We'll go into that later on in the 5th canto.
Oh, okay.
The 5th canto of the Bhagavatam contains all the knowledge about the universal forms, and there's different universes. These material universes, like the planets and the galaxies, and there's millions of universes like this one. Some are bigger than this one, some are smaller, but all these universes put together are only 1/4 of the entire creation of God. The actual 3/4 of the other 3/4 is the spiritual world, where everyone is eternal, full of knowledge and bliss, and their bodies do not deteriorate and die. There's no birth, death, old age, or disease in the spiritual world. And once you go there, you never come back, just like this verse is saying. So that those planets are self-luminous. There's no need of sun or moon or electricity or fire. They're self-luminous planets. Okay, so I'll read the rest of this purport here. One should be captivated by this information. He should desire to transfer himself to that eternal world and extricate himself from this false reflection of reality. For one who is too much attached to this material world, it's very difficult to cut that attachment. But if he takes to Krishna consciousness, there is a chance of gradually becoming detached. One has to associate with himself with devotees, those who are in Krishna consciousness. One should search out a society dedicated to Krishna consciousness and learn how to discharge devotional service. In this way, he can cut off his attachment to the material world. One cannot become detached from the attraction of the material world simply by dressing himself in saffron cloth. He must become attached to the devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, one should take it very seriously that devotional service, as described in the 12th chapter, is the only way to get out of the false representation of the real tree. In chapter 14, the contamination of all kinds of processes by material nature is described. Only devotional service is described as purely transcendental. The words paramamamai are very important here. Actually, every nook and corner is the property of the Supreme Lord, but the spiritual world is paramam, full of 6 opulences. The Katha Upanishad 2.2.15 also confirms that in the spiritual world, there is no need of sunshine, moonshine, or stars. Na tatra suyur bhati na chandra tarakam. For the whole spiritual sky is illuminated by the internal potency of the Supreme Lord. That supreme abode can be achieved only by surrender and by no other means. In other words, when Krishna is pleased with us by our surrender and service, then he reveals himself to us and we become qualified. I was talking about this tree, this false tree of the material world, that it seemingly has no beginning or end, but one should find out, one should cut it down by the process of knowledge and detachment. But actually, when we associate with devotees and chant the holy name and read these books, all our material attachments fall off. And just like lotus leaf falls off a lotus, and it happens automatically. But, it is a process of association with devotees and by taking part in devotional and learning how to prosecute devotional service. By service and surrender, we can get rid of all our false material attachments, and all the dirt in our heart is cleansed away, and then we become qualified to attain the spiritual abode where we never have to come back here, which is good because this place sucks.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, you just take one look at what's going on in the world. You know, this place is. Prabhupada said this material world is no place for a gentleman. Text 7. Mamaivam sojiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana mana shastrendriyani prakristani karshati. Let me see. Okay, we'll take turns reading paragraphs. That's a long purport in this one. Prakristani karshati. Mama, my, eva, certainly, amsa, fragmental particle, jiva loka, in the world of conditional life, jiva bhuta, the conditioned living entity, sanatana, eternal, mana, with the mind, shastani, the six, indriyani, senses, prakriti, in material nature, stani, situated, karshati, is struggling hard. Translation: the living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. Go ahead.
In this verse, the identity of the living being is clearly given. The living entity, you kind of scored on too fast. The living entity is the fragmental part and the parcel of the Supreme Lord eternally. It is not that he assumes individuality in his conditional life, and in his liberated state becomes one with the Supreme Lord. He is eternally fragmented. It is clearly said, sanatana, according to the Vedic version, the Supreme Lord manifests and expands himself in innumerable expansions, of which the primary expansions are called Vishnu Tattva, and the secondary expansions are called the living entities. In other words, the Vishnu Tattva is in the personal expansion, and the living entities are the separated expansions. By his personal expansion, he is manifested in various forms, like Lord Rama, Nrsimhadev, Vishnu Murti, and all the predominating deities in the Vaikunatha planets. The separated expansions, the living entities, are eternally servitors. The personal expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the individual identities of the Godhead, are always present. Similarly, the separate expansions of living entities have their identities. As fragmental parts and partial of the Supreme Lord, the living entities also have fragmental portions of his qualities, of which independence is one. Every living entity, as an individual soul, has his personal individuality and a minute form of independence.
Minute.
By misuse,
minute means small.
Minute form of independence. By misuse of that independence, one becomes a conditioned soul, and by proper use of independence, he is always liberated. In either case, he is qualitatively eternal, as the Supreme Lord is. In his liberated state, he is freed from this material condition, and he is under the engagement of transcendental service unto the Lord. In his conditioned life, he is dominated by the material modes of nature, and he forgets the transcendental loving service of the Lord. As a result, he has to struggle very hard to maintain his existence in this material world.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really hard. That hits hard.
Yeah. Well, once you're in the modes of material nature, you no longer have any freedom. You're thinking you're free. You're acting as if you're the controller and the doer of activities, when actually the material modes of nature are actually leading you around like bull with a nose ring. You pull the bull's rope and the bull thinks I'm going this way. And then you pull it the other way and the bull thinks, okay, now I'm going to go this way. But actually you're being pulled at every minute. So you have no independence. You have a minute independence, and you can either become conditioned by the material nature, or you can surrender to Krishna. And when you surrender to Krishna, then you can see things as they are and be free from all this hard struggle for existence, because whatever is, Krishna is within your heart is telling you to do is confirmed from without by the spiritual master. And then you're free to act, because everything becomes clear. You're actually seeing things as they are. When you're under the modes of material nature, you're in illusion, because you're thinking I'm this body and my family is mine and this property is mine and I, me, and mine. These are the false ego, the false conceptions of conditional life. And when you're thinking you're the doer and you're thinking that unless I do certain things, I can't be successful in satisfying my senses. Everybody thinks that to satisfy the senses is the goal of life, but actually the goal of life is to satisfy Krishna's senses. That's what Prabhupada is saying here right from the very beginning of the Bhagavad-gītā. We have to learn how to satisfy Krishna's senses. And when we do that, everything becomes easy. We're no longer attacked by the hard struggle for existence. Oh, let me do things this way, or maybe do things that way. Maybe I'll be happy in this way or that way. And we'll never come to an end to our plans or our schemes for happiness. And we'll always be frustrated because we're trying to do things for ourselves instead of trying to do things for Krishna. Krishna is the root of existence. If you water the root of a tree, all the leaves and branches are satisfied. But if you water the leaves and branches, the tree will die. So you have to water the root. Serve the root of existence by serving Krishna's senses instead of our own senses. Then we become liberated and we don't have to struggle so hard. It's like a yoke that's like lifted from our shoulders. We don't have to struggle so hard to maintain our families and society, because Krishna is taking care of everything. Just like in the Bible, it says, consider the lilies of the field. Neither they spin nor they toil, but everything is being taken care of by Krishna. A little tiny ant is eating like a grain of sugar, and an elephant is getting 400 pounds of food every day. So what is the problem for a human being? He's thinking that he has to struggle so hard, but Krishna is supplying everything, especially to his devotee. He provides everything. And if we just depend on him, then we don't have to struggle very hard to maintain our existence. We just do enough to keep our body and soul together and not try to be rich or try to engage in, have big schemes to increase our so-called happiness. That's called Maya Sukhaya. We're trying to make all kinds of plans for our own material sense gratification, but it ends up creating more problems than we set out to solve in the first place. It just becomes very complicated. But when we depend on Krishna, Krishna takes care of everything.
I agree with you.
The living entities, not only human beings, but the cats and dogs, but even the greater controllers of the material world, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, are all parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. They're all eternal, not temporary manifestations. The word karshati, struggling or grappling hard, is significant. The conditioned soul is bound up as though shackled by iron chains. He's bound up by the false ego, and the mind is the chief agent which is driving him in this material existence. When the mind is in the mode of goodness, his activities are good. When the mind is in the mode of passion, his activities are troublesome. And when the mind is in the mode of ignorance, he travels in the lower species of life. It is clear, however, in this verse that the conditioned soul is covered by the material body with the mind and the senses, and when he's liberated from this, when he's liberated, this material covering perishes, but his spiritual body manifests itself in its individual capacity. The following information is there in the Madhyadhinayana Shruti. Savaisha Brahmanishta idam shariram martyam atisrijya brahma bishampadya brahmana pasyati brahmana shrinoti brahmanaivam dam sarvam anubhavati. It is stated here that when a living entity gives up this material embodiment and enters into the spiritual world, he revives his spiritual body, and in his spiritual body, he can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. He can hear and speak to him face to face, and he can understand the Supreme Personality as he is. From Shmiti, it's also understood, Vashanti Yatra Purusha Sarve Vakunta Murtiya. In the spiritual planets, everyone lives in bodies featured like the Supreme Personality of Godheads. As far as bodily construction is concerned, there is no difference between the part and parcel living entities and the expansions of the Vishnu Murti. In other words, at liberation, the living entity gets a spiritual body by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So you attain a spiritual body to enter into the spiritual world. We can't go to the spiritual world in our material bodies. Go ahead and read the last paragraph.
Yeah.
That word is mamai vamsa. The word mamai vamsa.
The words Mama Vaisnam, fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are also very significant. The fragmental portions of the Supreme Lord is not like some material broken part. We already understood in the second chapter that the spirit cannot be cut into pieces. This fragment is not materially conceived. It is not like matter, which can be cut into pieces and joined together again. That conception is not applicable here because the Sanskrit word sanatana, eternal, is used. The fragmental portion is eternal. It is also stated in the beginning of the second chapter that in every individual body, the fragmental portions of the Supreme Lord is present. Dahinu, Smin, Yatha, Dahi.
That's right.
That fragmental portion, when liberated from the bodily entanglement, revives its original spiritual body in the spiritual sky and a spiritual planet and enjoys associations with the Supreme Lord. It is, however, understood here that the living entity, being the fragmental part and partial of the Supreme Lord, is qualitatively one with the Lord, just as the parts and parcels of gold are also gold.
Yeah, we're qualitatively, it's like there's gold in jewelry and there's gold in the mine. Qualitatively, we're one. It's just like the gold in a piece of jewelry is the same as the gold in the mine, or a drop of seawater, a drop of salt water is the same as in quality as the ocean, but we're minute in quantity, whereas Krishna is unlimited in quantity. We're qualitatively one, but we're quantitatively different than the Supreme Lord. Text 8. Shadidam vad yad avapnoti yat shapi ukarma tivshvara gihit vaitani samyati vayur gandani vasayat. Translation or synonyms. Shariram, the body, yat as. Shariram, the body, yat as. Avapnoti, gets. Yat as. Chapi, also utkramati, gives up. Ishvara, the Lord of the body. Grihitva, taking. Itani, all these. Samyati, goes away. Vayu, the air. Gundan, smells. Eva, like. Asayat, from their source. Translation. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. Thus, he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. This is the process of transmigration of the soul. You carry the conceptions you have in this life to another body. So whatever you think of in this life, you'll get a body that's suitable for your conditions in the next life. It's just a natural process. In the reincarnation, you get a body that's according to your deeds, according to your desires, and according to your consciousness at the time of death, and according to your karma, and according to higher authorities, you get your next body. Go ahead and read the purport.
That was interesting. Here, the living entity is described as Isvara, right? Isvara.
Mm-hmm. Ish. When you have a little thing over the S, that's pronounced SH, so it's Ishvara.
Ishvara, the controller of his own body. If he likes, he can change his body to a higher grade. And if he likes, he can move to a lower class. Minute independence is there. The change his body undergoes depends upon him. At the time of death, the consciousness he has created will carry him on to the next type of body. If he has made his consciousness like that of a cat or a dog, he is sure to change to a cat or a dog's body. And if he has fixed his consciousness on godly qualities, he will change into the form of a demigod. And if he is in Krishna consciousness, he will be transferred to Krishna Loka in the spiritual world and will associate with Krishna. It is a false claim that after the annihilation of this body, everything is finished. The individual soul is transmigrating from one body to another, and his present body and present activities are the background of his next body. One gets a different body according to the karma, and he has to quit this body in due course. It is stated here that the subtle body, which carries the conception of the next body, develops another body in the next life. The process of transmigrating from one body to another and struggling while the body is called karsati, or struggle for existence.
The dot, the S with the period underneath it is also pronounced SH, karsati, or struggle.
Karsati.
So even the most intelligent people in this material world, like my father, he's still alive. He's like 92 years old. But he doesn't believe anything exists after this body. But here we can see that Prabhupada is talking about the fact that it's not true that at the time of is a false claim that after the annihilation of this body, everything is finished. So you're not finished at the time of death. You just simply change your body based on the conceptions you've acquired in this life, and you acquire your next body according to that consciousness. So it's a progression of the soul. It's not it's an evolution of the soul, not an evolution of bodily forms. But it's like taking one apartment. If you can afford a bigger and better apartment, then you can get a higher body like that of a demigod. But if you are like simply eating, sleeping, mating, and defending like an animal, then you might get an animal body if you don't actually take advantage of the human form of life and try to liberate yourself from the cycle of birth and death and just live like an animal and not inquire as to who you are or what the purpose of life is. Only human beings can ask that question. So if we don't do that, then we could become a body of an animal. My next door neighbor even said that. He didn't believe that anybody could degrade, but it is possible to degrade to an animal form. And that's the most dangerous type of fear, because then you have to go back into the evolutionary cycle and go from species to species until you get back to the human form of life again. And then you can be released from this bodily encagement. The human form of life is a special gift from which to escape the cycle of birth and death. So we have to take advantage of that by becoming very serious about the opportunity that's been given in this human body. It's a rare thing. So we've got only about a minute left, or 2 minutes.
Can I ask a question during this?
Yeah,
real
go
quick?
ahead.
What's
We're just going to
what's
leave it here, and then, but
Yeah.
go ahead and ask a question. We've got 2 minutes left.
Yeah, what's Goloka Vrindavan and Krishna Loka, or is it the same thing?
No, Goloka Vrindavan, Krishna Loka and Goloka Vrindavan are the same. There are many different levels of the spiritual world. There's called Vaikuntha. Vai means without, and Kunta means anxiety. Like the Narayan forms of Krishna with 4 hands, holding a conch, disc, lotus, and club, they're Narayan forms, and they have their own planets, and everybody there lives eternally also. But the Krishna Loka is a direct replica of the Vrindavan planet we have here, or actually vice versa. The Vrindavan village that Krishna appeared in is an exact replica of that of this Goloka Vrindavan. That's why they call it Vrindavan. Go means cow, and Loka means planet. Planet of the cows. When Krishna was a cowherd boy, and he loves the cows. So that is the meaning of Goloka. Go means cows. And so Krishna is cowherd boy. And that's his original form. It's not like a form that he just took. He is always a cowherd boy, and he is always in Vrindavan. He always will be. That's an eternal form of his. It's his pastime. It's his eternal pastime. And he has his friends and his family and his lovers and his cows, and the land of Vrindavan is sacred. So that's Goloka Vrindavan. We got less than a minute left. I just wanted to thank you for tuning in. So you're going to be at the program tomorrow night?
Yeah, I'll be there, and I hope I'll find. And if for some reason, I'll just do the best I can to find parking. I'm sure there'll be something there.
Parking?
Yeah.
Yeah, you might have to circle around the block or once or twice.